Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
All right, here it is. Officially the end.
The end.
Well, not officially, but officially, basically, because once Lee's gone, everybody else is gone. Crazy. Yep. It's been a long time coming for this. Petersburg campaign, or siege of Petersburg began all the way back in 1864.
Mm-hmm. The fall of 1864.
Yeah, we've been working up on this for the last 5 episodes, exclusively the Appomattox campaign, and here we end it with the Battle of Appomattox Station and the, not even really a battle of Appomattox Court House, but the surrender at Appomattox Court House. Well, what a ride has it been. And for those of you that haven't been listening, we're going to take a quick, well, not so quick, but we're going to pretty much take a little recap from the start of the Petersburg campaign up into these last few, pretty much since April 1st. It's been 8 straight days of running away by as soon as Petersburg fell.
Yep.
So we'll take you to that before we get into the Appomattox Station and ultimately the surrender. If you guys have been listening with us all along, we'll leave a timestamp in the description so you can just skip ahead to the actual Battle of Appomattox Station. If not, then you can sit here and rewind it with us. So
be kind.
Yep, and then it's all over. We got maybe 1-2 more episodes of battles after this, and then
yeah, we gotta wait for Johnston to finally realize party's over.
3.5 years of doing this podcast, and it's almost done. Well, the battles, anyways.
Right.
Crazy stuff. We're going to have the Battle of Appomattox Station as our first battle, but like I said, we're going to take a look at the lead up to it, including the Siege of Petersburg, Lewis's Farm, White Oak Road, Dinwiddie Courthouse, and we got Rice's. We got a lot that we have to catch up on. Yeah, we'll start it from right there. How we got here. Lieutenant General Grant's Union Army group broke the Confederate defenses of Petersburg at the Battle of Five Forks, April 1st, and the Third Battle of Petersburg, April 2nd. Union Division under the command of Brigadier General Nelson Miles also broke up the last defense of the South Side Railroad at the Battle of Sutherland Station, which was on the afternoon of April 2nd, cutting off that railroad as supply line or route of retreat for the Confederates. General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia evacuated Petersburg and the capital of Richmond on the night of April 2nd, 3rd morning, and began a retreat with the intent of reaching Danville, Virginia, then linking up with Joseph Johnston's army, which at this point is attempting to slow the advance of William T. Sherman, who's in North Carolina right now. So
Sherman's on a roll.
Yeah.
Much of the Army of Northern Virginia, local defense troops, and a battalion of sailors, as well as Confederate President Jefferson Davis and his cabinet, they were able to escape from Petersburg and Richmond just in advance of the Union troops entering those cities on the 3rd of April, because the old Red rear guard forces, especially at Fort Gregg and Whitworth and Fort Mahone and Sutherland Station, they fought desperately.
Did they?
They fought so desperate that they had to delay actions on April 2nd to give most of the Confederates a head start, because the Unions were coming, and they were coming fast.
Well, it didn't really matter. While most of Lee's army had an effective one-day head start on their march, the advanced cavalry and infantry corps of the Union, under the command of Major General Philip Sheridan, they were able to keep Lee's forces to their north by pursuing Lee on a parallel course to their south. Union cavalry harassed and skirmished with Confederate units almost from the beginning of Lee's army's flight from Petersburg. Yeah, it was like literally 7 straight days of just harassment.
Right, just nothing but run, baby, run. 3rd of April, 1865. Advanced units of the Union cavalry under the command of Brigadier General George Armstrong Custer, poor guy. They fought with rear guard Confederate cavalry at the Battle of Namozine Church, which we did. 4th of April, 1865. The opposing forces skirmished at Beaver Pond Creek, or Tabernacle Church, and again at Amelia Courthouse. Meanwhile, Sheridan's forces occupied Jetersville, which is in Virginia, and also Burkeville Junction, and important railroad junction that was, and they occupied it.
They sure did. General Lee first planned to reunite the 4 columns of his army marching from Petersburg and Richmond, and to resupply them at Amelia Courthouse in Virginia, which was 39 miles southwest of Richmond. Lee's men left their positions in Petersburg with only 1 day's rations. Lee expected to find a supply train of rations that he had ordered brought to Amelia Courthouse to meet the army at that location. When he arrived there, Lee found only ordnance but no rations. And he's like, damn.
He's like, not again.
Well, he then delayed there a day to allow his men to forage in the area, but he also could not move without leaving part of his army behind, as all the troops did not reach Amelia Court House until the next morning anyways.
Jeez, it's just, I don't even know why. Just stop. Just stop where you're at and turn around.
Right.
Have the flag ready. Just pointless. Morning of 5th of April, Sheridan sent Brigadier General Henry Davies' brigade of Major General George Crook's division. He said, go scout for some Confederate movements beyond Amelia Courthouse, which was near Paineville, or Payne's Crossroads. That's what they called it. This was about 5 miles north of Amelia Springs. About 4 miles east of Paineville, Davies found and attacked a wagon. He's like, look at this wagon train. Let's get it, boys. This wagon train left Richmond with provisions for Lee's army, including food, ammo, and headquarters baggage, which was guarded by Brigadier General Martin Gary's cavalry brigade. Coincidentally, Davies came across another wagon train with excess artillery from Amelia Courthouse approaching his position from the south. Look at that.
After burning many of the Confederate wagons, including headquarters wagons, capturing horses, mules, and some artillery pieces, plus he took 630 prisoners, Davies began to return to Jetersville. Major General Fitzhugh Lee with the Confederate cavalry divisions of Major General Thomas Rosser and Colonel Thomas Munford, they assaulted the Union cavalry on their return, starting a run and fight from north of Amelia Springs to within 1 mile of Jetersburg. Reaching as far as Amelia Springs, the other brigades of Crook's division, which was under Brigadier General J. Irving Gregg and Colonel Charles Smith, they provided reinforcements which allowed Davies' force to reach Jetersville with their prisoners, guns, and teams.
Look at that.
Everything's coming together.
No worse for wear. Starting to move his own army toward Jetersville at 1 p.m. with Lieutenant General James Longstreet's First Corps in the lead. General Lee discovered that his route to Danville was blocked. It was blocked by fast-moving Union cavalry.
Yeah.
Lee decided that he could not bring up his army fast enough to fight their way through before large numbers of Union infantry would arrive to assist. That very night of the 5th of April, Army of Northern Virginia, Longstreet's corps again in the lead. They marched toward Rice's Station, which is also in Virginia, where they expected to receive further supplies. There's expected supplies everywhere.
That was the thing, too. Like, the Union kept beating these guys to their places, and they couldn't rest because they had to do a night march to get ahead of the Union, never could get ahead of the Union. Well, due to this long, slow-moving Confederate wagon trains, the wet conditions, and the limited number of roads, Lee's corps followed one another in a long procession. On the morning of April 6th, Longstreet's corps reached Rice's Station, where they were joined by General Lee and Major General Fitzhugh Lee's cavalry. They were resupplied from trains that had reached that point and waited there for the other units to catch up.
That's something.
The Union forces approaching later in the day, the trains with the remaining rations and supplies were sent to Farmville, Virginia, further to the west.
Okay. At Burkeville, or Burke's Junction, on the night of 5th of April, Grant ordered Major General Ord to destroy High Bridge, the Southside Railroad Bridge, and underlying wagon bridge over the Appomattox River. This was about 4 miles east of Farmville, as well as the railroad and wagon bridges at Farmville. So I don't want nothing in or out, baby. His purpose was to hinder or prevent the movement of Lee's army to Danville or Lynchburg, and he wanted also to confine them to the south side of the river. Before dawn on 6th April, Ord sent his headquarters cavalry, composed of 80 men of the 4th Regiment of Cavalry, Massachusetts Volunteers under Colonel Francis Washburn, and also 2 small infantry regiments under the overall command of, you guessed it, Colonel Theodore Reed himself. And he said, guess what? Burn those bridges if they're not well guarded.
Yeah, only if they're not too well guarded.
Right.
Later learning that at least part of Lee's army was at Rice's Station near High Bridge, Ward tried unsuccessfully to warn Reed that he likely would face a much larger force if he continued. Longstreet did indeed send a large force to save High Bridge, and after a fierce fight in which several top officers on both sides were killed or wounded, the Confederates saved the bridge and captured the entire surviving unit force.
Fucking yeah. Despite Grant's and Sheridan's view that Lee's army would be in motion to the west on the morning of April 6th, Army of Potomac Commander Major General George Meade sent his 3 corps northeast towards Amelia Courthouse in order to intercept the old rebel force, which he believed would have to remain there overnight. Brigadier General Gershom Mott's division of Major General Andrew Humphrey's 2nd Corps that came across the rear of the Confederate Army moving west of Amelia Courthouse. Here we go.
Well, Brigadier General Nelson Miles' division brought up some artillery and opened fire on the Confederate column as they marched out of sight.
Oh, wow.
Humphreys' corps then began a run-in battle with Major General John B. Gordon's 2nd Corps over 14 miles, which ended at one of the 3 actions that were part of the Battle of Sailor's Creek.
Damn.
As night approached, Humphreys' corps destroyed many wagons, took 13 flags, 3 guns, and reported taking about 1,700 prisoners.
Damn.
As the rest of Gordon's disorganized men headed for High Bridge.
You're shooting at some chunks of prisoners now. Damn. Meanwhile, Lieutenant General Richard Anderson's corps repulsed an attack by Major General George Crook's cavalry at J. Holt's house, where the road forked to Rice's Station or down to Sailor's Creek. Reinforced by Brigadier General Wesley Merritt's 2 divisions under Brigadier General George Armstrong Custer and Thomas Devon, Old Crook's division attacked again, but was again driven off by Anderson's men, who were reinforced by part of the trailing corps of Lieutenant General Richard Ewell. Look at Ewell. Thought he was hurt.
Look at Ewell. Most of the Union cavalry moved parallel to the Confederate line of march. Custer's division found a gap in the Confederate line of march, caused by Longstreet moving ahead of the slower wagon train and Anderson's trailing corps. Custer's troopers blocked the road while destroying a large number of wagons and capturing 12 guns. Union Colonel Peter Stagg's brigade of Brigadier General Thomas Devon's cavalry division joined with Major General Horatio Wright's 6th Corps in an attack on Ewell's stalled division. And this is where everybody gets fucking Anderson, Ewell, they're all done.
Done. The old bluecoats caught up to Anderson and Ewell's corps, who were without artillery, as the old rebels were positioned almost back to back near Sailor's Creek. Ewell's corps was almost surrounded, and all but about 250 of his men, from a reported 3,400 of his men, were casualties, mostly captured. Wow. Anderson lost about 2,600 of his 6,300 men. 8 generals were captured, including Ewell and Lee's son, Major General George Washington Custis Lee. Son of a bitch. That's probably why Lee had to surrender. Right.
During the day, April 7th, Major General Ord moved up to the Rice's Station and fought a minor battle, which was the Battle of Rice's Station, with Lieutenant General Longstreet's entrenched men. Having suffered 66 casualties, Ord called off the attack as darkness approached, apparently worried that the entire Confederate army was present and that he should wait for reinforcements. Longstreet's corps and Major General Fitzhugh Lee's cavalry moved out toward Farmville during the night.
Okay.
When Ord discovered the Confederates were gone, he pursued them toward Farmville. Sheridan said, "Crook, why don't you go down there and take your cavalry division to Farmville as well, buddy?"
All right. Look at that shit. Rebel Major General William Mahone's division of Longstreet's corps had been stationed near Sailor's Creek about nightfall. They were doing that to cover the withdrawal of the survivors of the battle there. Morning of the 7th of April, Humphrey's 2nd Corps left the Sailor's Creek battlefield in time to reach High Bridge before the fleeing Confederates, including Mahone's division. They couldn't even destroy that damn wagon bridge. They wanted to. They tried. Humphrey's division pursued Mahone and Gordon on separate roads toward Farmville.
Well, meanwhile, Brigadier General Francis Barlow's division cut off part of Gordon's wagon train and destroyed many wagons, but Brigadier General Thomas Smith was mortally wounded, which stunned his men and temporarily stalled the Union attack.
That's right.
Colonel William Olmsted's brigade moved to support Smith's brigade, but about 100 of his men were captured as Confederates attacked an isolated group, while Smith's troops were hesitated in the move because they're like, "Not Thomas Smith."
Oh, man.
They're all fucking fucked in the head. They're like, "Damn,
They
must have loved him then, huh?"
Had to have, right? After receiving rations at Farmville, Longstreet's corps crossed to the north side of Appomattox River, destroying the Farmville bridges as generally ordered, but leaving the Confederate cavalry and an infantry brigade to find a ford to cross. Then you got to go somewhere else. Although rations were not fully distributed, the Confederate trains were...
How hard is it to say rations?
It's rations. The Confederate trains are directed to Pamplin Station with the intention of keeping them from being captured or destroyed. But the remaining supplies were destroyed by Crook's cavalry anyway, passing through Pamplin the very next day.
Yeah.
Crook's cavalry division in the 6th Corps occupied Farmville as Longstreet's men left. Due to high water and lack of crossings, Crook's cavalry division was the only Union unit able to cross the river at a nearby ford that afternoon. Everybody else has to wait.
Yeah, well, by the afternoon of April 7th, Mahone and Gordon had entrenched on high ground at Cumberland Church and soon were joined by the remainder of the Confederate Army. Upon his 2nd Corps being shelled when they approached the Confederate line, Humphreys attacked the Confederate position, bringing on the Battle of Cumberland Church.
There you go.
Not realizing that other Union infantry could not cross the Appomattox at Farmville and reinforce them, Humphreys made a second futile attack when he heard the sound of battle nearby, which he thought was another Union infantry attack on the Confederate line at the Battle of Cumberland Church, but it was not.
Wow. Well, what he was hearing has sometimes been called the Battle of Farmville, rather than part of the Battle of the Cumberland Church, which was an engagement between part of Crook's cavalry division and Confederate cavalry guard in a wagon train headed west. Confederate cavalry surprised the leading Union troops and inflicted 74 casualties, among which were many prisoners, including Union Brigadier General J. Irvin Gregg.
Oh, Gregg.
Oh, what happened to Gregg? Either the Confederates drove the Union forces back across the river, or coincidentally, at about this time, Sheridan recalled Crook to Farmville. And in any event, Sheridan directed Crook to move his division to Prospect Station, which is about 10 to 12 miles to the west of Farmville. Crook's division arrived at Prospect Station about midnight.
Meanwhile, Barlow's division came to the Cumberland Church battlefield only at about sunset. As night approached and he was not reinforced, Humphreys discontinued the battle, having suffered 571 casualties. The Confederates had now put themselves in a position where they were 8 miles further from the next possible supply point at Appomattox Station than were the Union troops at Farmville.
Oh, wow.
And they also had been delayed at the Battle of the Cumberland Church. Yeah, they're just not, nothing's going their way, man.
Right. Before the old Rebs departed from the vicinity of Cumberland Church on the night of the 7th of April, the first of Grant's letters to Lee asking for the surrender of Lee's army was delivered to Lee. And, as you can guess, it was declined by Lee as not yet necessary. In reply, Lee did ask what terms Grant would offer upon his army surrender. During that very night, the old Rebs withdrew again for a third night march, which ended at and just east of Appomattox Court House the following afternoon.
All right, so they're there at the courthouse and just east of the courthouse right now. After 2 or 3 hours rest, Humphreys' corps pursued the Confederates for 26 miles to within 3 miles of Longstreet's rear guard, where on the morning of April 9th, Humphreys had to stop to rest his men and allow his ration train to catch up. Rations. Confederate Brigadier General Lindsey Walker's 3rd Corps Reserve Artillery Train was the first unit to leave the Cumberland Church area at 1 a.m. April 8th.
Okay.
Walker, with some gunners converted to infantry and a guard of about 500 cavalrymen, which was under Brigadier General Martin Gary, arrived in the vicinity of Appomattox Station about 3 miles west of the courthouse April 8th between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. Gordon's corps stopped about 1 mile east of the courthouse at about 3 p.m., while the rest of the Confederate army spread out for 10 miles.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Pretty good battle line, though.
Yeah. After the Battle of Sailor's Creek, Grant, he decided that he had to guard against the Confederate effort to escape to Danville. He wanted to do that by moving to the south toward Keysville, Virginia. He sent Sheridan's, Crook's, and Brigadier General Ranald Mackenzie's cavalry, followed by Griffin's 5th Corps, Gibbons's 14th Corps.
24th, but yep.
Yep. And 2 brigades of William Birney's 2nd Division of the 25th Corps.
Yep.
Also under Gibbon, to Prince Edward Courthouse, which is present-day Worsham, Virginia.
Okay.
Sheridan ordered Merritt's cavalry to move to Buffalo Creek and Spring Creek, 7 miles south of Farmville, 4 miles from Prospect Station, where they went to camp for the night. Mackenzie's force was consolidated with Crook's division, which was camped at Prospect Station.
Morning of April 8th, George Crook's division led the way along the railroad toward the Appomattox Courthouse. About 3 miles out of Prospect Station, Wesley Merritt's command consisted of Custer's and Devon's divisions. They headed cross-country toward the Appomattox Station, while Crook's division continued along the railroad to Pamplin Station, where they took all the supplies they could from the trains that had been diverted from Farmville the day before. Dude, they're just robbing the fucking Confederates trains, and they can do nothing about it.
Nothing, man, nothing. Soon after the Union cavalry had moved out of Prospect Station, Sheridan scouts dressed in Confederate uniforms reported to him that 8, which would later be found to be 4, trains had arrived at Appomattox Station. Sheridan expected these trains to arrive in the vicinity because the scouts had intercepted Lee's order for rations to be sent to him along the route. They forwarded the order to Lynchburg in anticipation that the trains could be captured before the old Rebs reached the station.
Well, they anticipated right.
General Custer and Devon were informed about the cars at Appomattox Station and ordered to reach there as soon as possible, prompting Custer and Devon to attempt a faster cross-country move, with Sheridan himself joining Custer's division. Look at that shit.
All right, well, Sheridan continued to ride with Custer as Custer's division took the lead in the ride toward the station. After about a further 7 miles ride from the Prospect Station to Walker's Church, Sheridan sent a message to Crook to ride to Appomattox Station and to assault the trains if he arrived first.
Ooh.
Meanwhile, Major General Ord urged and inspired his men of the 24th Corps and 2 brigades of the 2nd Division of the 15th Corps, 25th Corps, which were African Americans, followed by Griffin's 5th Corps, to follow the cavalry as quickly as they could in an effort to cut off the Confederates at Appomattox Station.
Do it.
As Brigadier General E.P. Alexander told General Lee at Cumberland Church, the Union forces south of the Appomattox River had a shorter route to the station than they do.
Yeah, no matter what you guys
beat
do.
us there, dude.
No matter what you do. Colonel Alexander Pennington Jr.'s brigade of Custer's division led the Blue Coat Cavalry to the South Side Railroad at Evergreen Station. Then they moved 6 miles more to the west to Appomattox Station, present-day Appomattox, Virginia. Here, Pennington's lead unit, Company K of the 2nd Regiment New York Volunteer Cavalry, would find the 4 trains of the railroad cars, which contain rations and other quartermaster supplies, including shoes, clothes, canteens, medical supplies, and ordnance.
Jeez, dude. Well, 3 of those trains were captured by 4 men of Company K. That's it. 2nd New York Cavalry Regiment, who rode up to the train engineers and ordered them to surrender, which they did, since only a few Confederate engineers of Colonel T.M.R. Talcott's command were the only soldiers near the station.
Oh, wow.
All right, what are they going to do?
Right.
In his account of the battle, Colonel Alanson Merwin Randall, commanding the 2nd New York Cavalry, said that the cars had been partially unloaded and were preparing to move away when Custer ordered Randall to capture them. Damn, so they almost didn't get there in time.
Ooh-wee. The locomotive and 1 or 2 cars of one of the trains escaped toward Lynchburg before Custer's men could tear up the track in front of it to prevent its escape.
Wow.
The remaining cars of that train were burned.
Yeah, why not? Why burn them? You already got them. Like, you could use them later.
After Randall's men stopped the 3 other trains from getting away, they gathered both white and black prisoners, many from Confederate quartermaster and commissary details. The dismounted men from Pennington's brigade took control of the station and the area. Plant that flag, baby.
Soon after the Union cavalrymen had captured the trains, Confederate artillery began to fire at the station. Colonel Randall reported that the regiment suffered little damage from the artillery fire. He said because the artillery had to fire through dense woods between the artillery park and the station. When Colonel Randall called for troopers with train operating experience to move the trains, enough men came forward to move the cars along the track to a position out of danger a few miles to the east toward Farmville with the Union lines. At least 2 of the volunteers were from the 2nd West Virginia Cavalry Regiment of Colonel Henry Capart's brigade. All right, good for you.
All right, so it worked out.
What'd they do, push it?
Seems to be, all right. The old rebel battery that had targeted the train and station later was captured when the Union cavalry assaulted the nearby Confederate wagon and artillery park. When Brigadier General Martin Gary's cavalry detached arrived at the railroad soon after the Union cavalry had taken control, they were driven back toward Walker's position. Like, no. Pennington's men of the 2nd New York Volunteer Cavalry Regiment were soon joined by the 3rd New Jersey Volunteer Cavalry Regiment in their defense of the station. According to Major Henry Edwin Tremaine, the 2 Union regiments had to hold off a larger force of Confederate cavalry until nearly dark when the main body of Custer's division arrived to reinforce them.
Well, some historians say that the 2nd Ohio Cavalry was the 2nd regiment to join the 2nd New York, with the 3rd New Jersey Cavalry soon to follow, so that it's inconsistent with Tremaine's account. 3 Union regiments held a depot rather than 2, whatever. In any event, the Union Cavalry drove the Confederates back toward Walker's artillery position, right? Pennington's advanced regiments followed the retreating Confederates as they moved toward the Lynchburg Stage Road between Lynchburg and Appomattox Court House with sunset approaching.
Ooh, that beautiful sunset. Must be a good day tomorrow for you boys. Lynchburg Stage Road, 2 miles north of the railroad station, was the main route between the Appomattox Court House and Lynchburg that was available to Lee's army.
Yeah.
Near Appomattox Station, along the Lynchburg Road, the Confederates had parked a hospital train, a large group of wagons, and about 100 artillery pieces.
Jeez.
A small infantry unit, mostly armed artillerymen, and the 500-man cavalry detachment of Brigadier General Martin Gary's command guarded that very wagon park.
About 4 p.m., the sounds of the attack of the Appomattox Station had alerted Walker to the approach of the Union cavalry, and he put Martin Gary's dismounted cavalry on his flanks, armed artillerymen out front as skirmishers, and about 24 of his guns arrayed in an arc on a rise facing the station. The area in which the Confederate artillery was located and over which the Union cavalry had to operate was cut through with wagon roads and overgrown with timber and underbrush. It was a poor location for either cavalry or artillery to fight in, especially after dark.
Well, yeah, no shit.
You gotta do what you gotta do, though. I don't think you have much choice.
All right. In their haste to defend themselves, the Confederate artillerymen fired into their own men, killing or wounding several of them before the artillerymen realized their mistake. Jeez. After the Union regiments came within striking distance of the Confederate camp, the makeshift Confederate infantry skirmishers fired upon them. The Bluecoats men nonetheless proceeded with the poorly organized attack of about 400 men against the main Confederate artillery, and they were driven back. Here comes General Custer. His entire 1st Brigade under Colonel Pennington then came forward behind a large group of skirmishers and continued the uncoordinated attack started by his lead regiments.
Well, unfortunately for him, they were also driven back by the Confederate skirmishers and artillery.
Wow.
Undeterred by these setbacks, Custer was determined to capture the Confederate artillery and held a position on the Lynchburg Road. After Colonel Henry Capart's 3rd Brigade followed Pennington's men, onto the field, Custer sent all of his men against the Confederate position. Oh, shit.
Uh-oh.
Nearly 50 Union troopers were felled by canister used by the Confederate artillerymen.
Damn.
What are you going to do?
Now they want to do good on artillery.
Right.
When
100 fucking pieces.
When Colonel William Wells' 2nd Brigade arrived, Custer continued the attack as dark came on, even though thick woods sheltered the Confederate position. Even with the addition of Wells' brigade, another Union assault failed. Historian William Marvel credits the support of Gary's troopers and Colonel T.M.R. Talcott's engineers there armed,
Engineers, all right.
along with Walker's heavy ordnance for the strong showing and lengthy holdout by Walker's men. At least I got some kind words.
Right.
Custer then personally led an assault with his entire force, but without a breakthrough.
Oh, jeez. Well, about 9 p.m., under the light of a full moon, Custer's entire division again assaulted and finally broke the Confederate line. The Confederates began to withdraw, abandoning many of their active guns, caissons, and baggage wagons, which then were captured by Custer's men. The gradual dispersal of Walker's cannons and men and the withdrawal of Gary's and Talcott's men weakened Walker's remaining defense to the point of collapse upon Custer's final charge.
Oh, man.
The Confederate withdrawal from the Lynchburg Stage Road at this location allowed the Union cavalry to occupy a segment of the road and block the Confederate escape route towards Lynchburg. It's over with now, guys.
Yeah. The Appomattox River was not fordable in this vicinity, which prevented a Confederate escape to the north, an option without much possible benefit in any event.
Yep.
Union troops blocked the Army of Northern Virginia's movements in the other direction. Custer's casualties were 5 killed, 40 wounded, 3 missing. But most of the wounds suffered were severe.
So probably died.
Damn. As reported by Tremaine, surgeons of wide experience in the cavalry remarked that they were never treated so many extreme cases in so short time. The wounds were chiefly made by artillery and were serious, many patients being badly mangled.
I would assume. When their defense broke, some Confederates fled down the road to Lynchburg while others retreated towards Appomattox Court House. When the retreating artillerymen stopped to fire at the Union cavalry from both directions, a group of Custer's cavalrymen broke up this further Confederate resistance. Custer's troopers continued to advance towards Appomattox Court House until they encountered infantry in their path.
Here we go, right? Well, he then ordered the artillery and valuable contents captured from the wagon train to be sent south of the railroad station, while the rest of his men established a line to block the road where they had been halted. The captured material included between 24 and 30 guns, 150 to 200 wagons, mostly filled with baggage. Custer's men took almost 1,000 prisoners, including Brigadier General Young Marshal Moody, who was ill and riding in a hospital wagon.
Poor guy.
On the other hand, Walker's men saved about 75 cannons during the battle and their retreat.
All right.
Look at that.
Devon's division had come up in support of Custer's division, but had not been seriously engaged. Devon's troops relieved Custer's men along the road where they set up defensive lines facing Appomattox Court House and Lynchburg. Custer's men then turned to the task of clearing the field before trying to sleep for the rest of the night.
Oh, wow.
So we've done a lot today, boys.
All right, can we just get some fucking sleep? Custer, he wanted to locate the main body of Lee's troops, so he either sent the 15th Regiment New York Volunteer Cavalry, led by Lieutenant Colonel Augustus Root, to make a final charge along the pike toward Appomattox Courthouse, or Root took off on his own initiative, depending on the account, so nobody knows.
Either our Root went.
Right. Root's men caused some havoc.
I am Root.
Right. Yes. Root's men caused much havoc along the line of retreating artillery, gunners, wagons, and stragglers as they rode into the small town. Root and at least one other man were murdered, and one or more other Union troopers were wounded in their foray into town.
Well, according to Volume 5, Confederate Military History by former Confederate Brigadier General Ellison Capers, Jacob David Felder of Bamberg, South Carolina, who was a private in Company H, Hampton's Legion, he fired the fatal shot at Root after Root had fired at Felder first and narrowly missed. Historian William Marvel states that Root had ridden through the town with some daring troopers behind him when a few curious disorganized stragglers fired into the approaching horsemen. Why are these history guys always trying to discredit people that were actually there?
Assholes.
Meanwhile, the gunfire in town roused Bushrod Johnson's division, and about 1,000 of his men marched into town. Said, "What's going on here?"
What the hell? At the edge of town, the Confederate soldiers again laid down to wait and sleep if they could.
They're like, shit.
Meanwhile, the New York cavalrymen already were leading a group of prisoners and some abandoned wagons and caissons back to the Union lines. Custer's and Devon's division stayed awake until midnight, gathering food and souvenirs and clearing the area of the road, which they then held.
That's souvenirs.
Nice. Crook's division arrived at the battlefield after the fighting was over, of course. Sheridan later ordered Crook to send a brigade toward Appomattox Court House to watch the Confederates so the Union force would be on alert to prevent the old rebels from escaping by another route.
Well, Sheridan then sent a message to Grant about the day's operations at 9:20 p.m. He also urged Major General Edward Ord and his Army of the James and Brigadier General Charles Griffin with the 5th Corps to press ahead with all possible energy in order to cut off the Confederate avenue of escape at Appomattox. The lead units of the infantry columns reached Appomattox Station about 2 a.m. April 9th, although most of the infantry came up later in the morning while the cavalry were holding back the Confederate escape attempt.
Uh-oh, here we go. The marches and movements of the Union cavalry and the 24th Corps, 5th Corps, African-American men of the 25th Corps on the 8th of April to get ahead of the Army of Northern Virginia on their route west, as well as the efforts of the 2nd Corps and the 6th Corps to press the Confederates from behind. This all led to the Confederate Army being effectively surrounded on April 9th, 1865.
Well, Lee and his principal subordinates knew that the sound of gunfire from the direction of the station on April 8th meant the Union cavalry were indeed ahead of them.
Oh, man.
After discussing the situation with General Longstreet and Major Generals Gordon and Fitzhugh Lee, including mentioning Grant's terms of parole of the Army upon its surrender to them, Lee decided to attempt a breakthrough towards Lynchburg on the morning of April 9th if his army only had to confront Union cavalry. They said, we could do it. We got one last stand. If it's only cavalry, if not, then we're fucked.
Right. Wow. If Union infantry were also ahead of them, they would need to reconsider their actions.
Yeah.
Gordon and Fitzhugh Lee were assigned the task of clearing the Union troopers off the road to Lynchburg. Lee wanted to press on for Danville by an indirect route through Campbell Courthouse. The plan was for Confederate troops to hurry through the Union cavalry blockade with only essential supplies. The wagon train would head toward Lynchburg by a circuitous route without an escort.
Oh.
Surplus wagons and supplies again would be burned. If Union infantry also blocked the way, Lee asked his subordinates to inform him so a flag of truce could be sent to Grant to accede to the only alternative left to us. Oh, man.
Upon Sheridan's order, Crook sent Colonel Charles Smith's brigade of Crook's division to set up on a commanding ridge across the Lynchburg Stage Road, which is west of Appomattox, just west of the Oakville Road. Smith had 4 regiments: 1st Maine Volunteer Cavalry Regiment, 2nd Regiment New York Mounted Rifles, 6th Ohio Cavalry Regiment, and the 13th Ohio Cavalry Regiment. Plus, they had 2 guns of Lord's 2nd United States Artillery Regiment. Custer's and Devon's divisions were at Appomattox Station for deployment and support.
About 10 p.m., Brigadier General John W. Turner's division of Major General John Gibbon's 24th Corps of Major General Ord's Army of the James, they reached the road, crossing with the South Side Railroad about 3 miles from the Appomattox Station. They haven't been marched 30 miles since dawn.
Good Lord.
Turner's troops stopped at the location where the trains captured at Appomattox Station had been sent. Brigadier General Robert Foster's division arrived at camp about an hour later, followed by African-American troops from 2 brigades of the 2nd Division of the 25th Corps.
Well, when Brigadier General Charles Griffin's 5th Corps arrived behind Ord's force, they camped with empty haversacks, too far back on the road to benefit from the provisions captured at Appomattox Station. What are you going to do? Generals Grant and Meade, who had traveled with the 2nd Corps in their pursuit of Gordon's Corps on April 8th, stayed at Clifton, which was a plantation 4.5 miles from New Store that night. Humphrey's 6th Corps also caught up and camped at New Store that night as well.
Okay.
Although Grant had been in a good mood in the morning on April 8th, he was suffering from a bad migraine headache by the afternoon and into the night.
Oh, man.
Poor
He's
guy.
gonna be pissed. Lee, he was about 16 miles ahead of Grant. He replied to Grant's further message with an evasive answer, in which he said he merely wondered what the terms would be if he surrendered. Not that time had come for that. He offered to meet Grant on the stage road at rear of his army at 10 a.m. on the 9th of April. Lee realized he would know by then if his army could escape. If not, he would have no alternative but to surrender the army or face his annihilation. Civil War Trust and its partners have acquired and preserved 45 acres of this very battlefield at the Appomattox Station.
All right, that's going to lead us to the next night, which is the courthouse, April 9th, which is one of the last and ultimately one of the most consequential battles of this war.
Oh, wow.
Also, obviously, the final engagement of Robert E. Lee and Grant. Why that Union Army was closing in on Lee, all that lay between Lee and Lynchburg was the Union cavalry, like we said. After Grant received Lee's letter, again saying, I wish to discuss these terms with you, Grant, suffering from his throbbing headache, still stated, it looks as if Lee still means to fight.
Oh.
The Union infantry was close, but the only unit near enough to support Sheridan's cavalry was Major General John Gibbon's 24th Corps of the Army of the James. This corps traveled 30 miles, yes. Major General Ord, commander of the Army of the James, arrived with the 24th Corps around 4 a.m., while the 5th Corps of the Army of the Potomac was close behind. Sheridan deployed his 3 divisions of cavalry along a low ridge to the southwest of the courthouse.
Okay, here we go. Dawn, 9th of April. Confederate 2nd Corps, Major General John B. Gordon, attacked Sheridan's cavalry, quickly forced back the first line under Brevet Brigadier General Charles H. Smith. The next line, held by Brigadier Generals Ronald McKenzie and George Crook, slowed the old rebel advance. Gordon's troops charged through the Union lines and took the ridge, but as they reached the crest, they saw the entire Union 24th Corps in line of battle with the Union 5th Corps to the right.
Oh, shit.
Lee's cavalry saw these Union forces and immediately withdrew and rode off towards Lynchburg.
Oh, no. Ord's troops began advancing against Gordon's corps, while the Union 2nd Corps began moving against Lieutenant James Longstreet's corps to the northeast. Colonel Charles Venable of Lee's staff rode in at this time and asked for an assessment, and Gordon gave him a reply he knew Lee did not want to hear. He said, "Tell General Lee I have fought my corps to a frazzle, and I fear I can do nothing unless I am heavily supported by Longstreet's corps." Well, upon hearing that, Lee finally stated the inevitable. "Then there is nothing left for me to do but to go and see General Grant, and I would rather die 1,000 deaths."
Oh,
jeez.
man. Many of Lee's officers, including Longstreet, agreed that surrendering the army was the only position left. The only notable officer opposed to surrender was Longstreet's chief of artillery, Brigadier General Edward Porter Alexander, who predicted that if Lee surrendered, then every other Confederate army would follow suit. Well, obviously,
what are you going to do?
Lee decided to request a suspension of fighting while he sought to learn the terms of surrender Grant was proposing to offer. A white linen dish towel was used as a Confederate flag of truce and was carried by Captain R.M. Sims, one of Longstreet's staff officers. He carried it into the lines of General Custer, who was part of Sheridan's command at that time.
Well, after a truce was arranged, Custer was escorted through the lines to meet Longstreet. According to Longstreet, Custer said, "In the name of General Sheridan, I demand the unconditional surrender of this army."
Oh, what a piece of shit.
Longstreet replied that he was not in command of the army, but if he were, he would not deal with messages from Sheridan anyhow. Custer responded that it would be a pity to have more blood upon the field, to which Longstreet suggested that the truce be respected, and then added, "General Lee has gone to meet General Grant, and it is for them to determine the future of the armies, not you."
Yeah, 8 a.m., Lee rode out to meet Grant, accompanied by 3 of his aides. Grant received Lee's first letter on the morning of the 9th of April, as he was traveling to meet Sheridan. Grant later recalled his migraine seemed to disappear when he read Lee's letter, and he handed it to his assistant Rollins to read aloud before composing his reply. "General, your note of this date is but this moment, 11:50 a.m., received. In consequence of my having passed from the Richmond and Lynchburg road, I am at this writing about 4 miles west of Walker's Church, and will push forward to the front of the purpose of meeting you. Notice sent to me on this road where you wish the interview to take place."
Grant's response was remarkable in that it let the defeated Lee choose the place of his surrender.
All right.
Lee received a reply within an hour and dispatched an aide who was Charles Marshall to find a suitable location for the occasion. Marshall scrutinized Appomattox Court House, a small village of roughly 20 buildings that served as a way station for travelers on the Richmond-Lynchburg stage road. Marshall rejected the first house he saw as it looked a little dilapidated, instead settling on the 1848 brick home of Wilmer McLean. McLean, he had lived near Manassas Junction during the First Battle of Bull Run and had retired to Appomattox to escape the war.
Oh, shit. Hey, fitting. The coincidence has been written of that farmer McLean, who relocated to avoid war after one of the Civil War's first battles happened on his land, would come to have the war's end negotiated in his sitting room.
Right, it's crazy.
With gunshots still being heard on Gordon's front and Union skirmishers still advancing on Longstreet's front, Lee received a message from Grant. After several hours of correspondence between Grant and Lee, a ceasefire was enacted, and Grant received Lee's request to discuss surrender terms. Oh, man.
Well, dressed in his ceremonial uniform, who, according to himself, he said, "I may be taken prisoner today. I must look my best." Lee waited for Grant to arrive. Grant, whose headache had ended when he received Lee's note, arrived at the McLean house in mud-spattered uniform, a government-issued sack coat with trousers tucked into muddy boots, no sidearms, and with only his tarnished shoulder straps showing his rank.
Look at that.
Over one shoulder was a carrying case for his binoculars. It was the first time these two men had set eyes on each other face to face in almost 2 decades.
Wow.
Suddenly overcame with sadness, Grant found it hard to get to the point of the meeting, and instead the two generals briefly discussed their only previous encounter, which happened during the Mexican-American War.
I knew you were going to be a great general, but not for these guys. Lee brought the attention back to the issue at hand, and Grant offered the same terms he had before. In accordance with the substance of my letter to you of the 8th, I propose to receive the surrender of the Army of Northern Virginia on the following terms. Rolls of all the officers and men to be made in duplicate. 1 copy to be given to an officer designated by me, the other to be retained by such officer or officers as you may designate. The officers to give their individual paroles not to take up arms against the government of the United States until properly exchanged, and each company or regimental commander sign a like parole for the men of their commands. So everybody's saying, we're done. The arms and artillery and public property be parked and stacked, and turned over to the officer appointed by me to receive them. This will not embrace the side arms of the officers, nor their private horses or baggage. Oh, wow. This done, each officer and man will be allowed to return to their homes, not to be disturbed by the United States authority, so long as they observe their paroles and the laws in force where they may reside.
That's a hell of a fucking...
You're not kidding. I wouldn't say another word. I'd be like, I'm out.
All right.
Free change your mind.
These terms were as generous as Lee could hope for. His men would not be in prison or prosecuted for treason. Officers were allowed to keep their sidearms, horses, and personal baggage.
I mean, come on.
In addition to his terms, Grant also allowed the defeated men to take home their horses and mules to carry out the spring planting, and provided Lee with a supply of food rations for his starving army.
Look at that.
Lee said it would have a very happy effect among the men and do much toward reconciling the country.
I think it will.
The terms of the surrender were recorded in a document handwritten by Grant's adjutant, who was Eli S. Parker, who was a Native American of the Seneca tribe, and completed about 4 p.m. April 9th.
Wow. General Lee, upon discovering Parker to be a Seneca, remarked this: "It is good to have one real American here." Parker replied, "Sir, we're all Americans." As Lee left the house and rode away, Grant's men began cheering in celebration, but Grant immediately ordered them to stop. I at once sent word, however, to have it stop. The Confederates were now our countrymen, and we did not want to exult over their downfall.
Oh, that guy.
Custer and the other Union officers purchased from McLean the furnishings of the room Lee and Grant met in as souvenirs, emptying it of furniture. They want everything in that damn house.
Yeah, dude.
Grant soon visited the Confederate Army, and then he and Lee sat on McLean's home's porch and met with visitors such as Longstreet and George Pickett before the two men left for their capitals. Wow.
April 10th, Lee gave his farewell address to his army. The same day, a 6-man commission gathered to discuss a former ceremony of surrender, even though no Confederate officer wished to go through with such an event. Brigadier General Joshua Chamberlain was the Union officer selected to lead the ceremony.
Oh, look at that. In his memoirs entitled The Passing of the Armies, Chamberlain reflected on what he witnessed on April 12, 1865, as the Army of Northern Virginia marched in to surrender their arms and their colors. It goes on to read as this: "The momentous meaning of this occasion impressed me deeply. I resolved to mark it by some token of recognition, which could be no other than a salute of arms. Well aware of the responsibility assumed and of the criticisms that would follow, as the sequel proved, nothing of that kind could move me in the least. The act could be defended, if needful, by the suggestion that such a salute was not to the cause for which the flag of the Confederacy stood, but to its going down before the flag of the Union. My main reason, however, was one of which I sought no authority, nor asked forgiveness. Before us, in proud humiliation, stood the embodiment of manhood, men whom neither toils and sufferings, nor the fact of death, nor disaster, nor hopelessness could bend from their resolve. Standing before us now, thin, worn, and famished, but erect, and with the eyes looking level into ours, wake in memories that bound us together as no other bond.
It's true.
Was not such manhood to be welcomed back into a union so tested and assured? Instructions had been given, and when the head of each division column comes opposite our group, our bugle sounds the signal, and instantly our whole line from the right to left, regiment by regiment in succession, gives the soldiers salutations, from the order arms to the old carry, the marching salute.
All right.
Gordon, at the head of the column, riding with heavy spirit and downcast face, catches the sound of the shifting arms, looks up, and taking the meaning, wheels superbly, making with himself and his horse one uplifted figure. Beautiful, right? Woo! With profound salutation as he drops to the point of his sword to the boat toe. Then facing to his own command, gives word for successive brigades to pass us with the same position of manual. Honor answering honor. On our part, not a sound of trumpet more, nor roll of drum, not a cheer, nor word nor whisper of vain glorying, nor motion of man standing again at the order, but an awed stillness rather, breath holding, as if it were the passing of the dead. Joshua L. Chamberlain, The Passion of the Armies, pages 260, 261.
All right, here's where we can get some hotshot little historian disputing all this. Well, Chamberlain's account has been questioned by historian William Marvel, who claims that few promoted their own legends more actively and successfully than he did. Marvel points out that Chamberlain, in fact, did not command the Federal surrender detail, but only one of the brigades in General Joseph Bartlett's division, and that he did not mention any salute in his contemporary letters, but only in his memoirs written many decades later when most other eyewitnesses had already been dead.
Oh, wow.
Well, Confederate General John Brown Gordon, who was in command of the 2nd Corps of the Army in Northern Virginia, did recall there was a salute, and he cherished Chamberlain's act of saluting his surrendered army, calling Chamberlain one of the knightliest soldiers of the Federal Army. Gordon stated Chamberlain called his troops into line, and as my men marched in front of them, the veterans in blue gave a soldierly salute to the vanquished heroes. This statement contradicts Marvel's perception of the event.
At the surrender ceremonies, about 28,000 Confederate soldiers passed by and stacked their arms. General Longstreet's account was 28,356 officers and men who surrendered and paroled.
Damn.
The Appomattox roster lists approximately 26,300 men who surrendered. This reference does not even include the 7,700 who were captured at Sailor's Creek 3 days earlier, who were treated as prisoners of war. Ooh, that sucks for them.
Right. Well, General George Meade, who was not present at the meeting, reportedly shouted, "It's all over," upon hearing the surrender was signed. Roughly 175,000 Confederates remained in the field, but were mostly starving and disillusioned.
Right.
Many of these were scattered throughout the South in garrisons or guerrilla bands, while the rest were concentrated in 3 major Confederate commands.
Right.
Just as Porter Alexander had predicted, as news spread of Lee's surrender, other Confederate commanders realized the strength of the Confederacy was gone, and they too decided to lay down their arms.
There ain't no sense, man. Well, speaking of, General Joseph E. Johnston's army in North Carolina, the most threatening of the remaining Confederate armies, surrendered to Major General William T. Sherman at Bennett Place in Durham, North Carolina. That happened on the 26th of April, 1865. 89,270 Confederate troops who laid down their weapons, the largest surrender of the war, marked the virtual end of the conflict. General Richard Taylor surrendered his army, the Department of Alabama, Mississippi, and East Louisiana. He did that at Citronelle, Alabama, 4th of May, 1865. President Jefferson Davis met with Confederate cabinet for the last time on the 5th of May, 1865. They did that in Washington, Georgia, and officially dissolved the Confederate government.
Jeez.
Davis and his wife, Verena, along with their escort, were captured by Union forces on the 10th of May at Irwinville, Georgia.
Upon hearing about Lee's surrender, General Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was the future leader of the KKK,
Oh, wow.
also surrendered, reading his farewell address May 9th, 1865 at Gainesville, Alabama. General Edmund Kirby Smith surrendered the Confederate Trans-Mississippi Department June 2nd in Galveston. Also May 26th, the Camp Napoleon Council of Native American Tribes, including a number that had sided with the Confederacy, they met in Oklahoma and decided to have commissioners offer peace with the United States.
All right, now the engines are getting along
they're
here,
just
huh?
fucking dominoes falling, dude.
Wow. Cherokee Chief and General Stan Wadey, in command of the 1st Cherokee Mounted Rifles, surrendered the last sizable organized Confederate force, June 23rd, 1865. They did that in Choctaw County, Oklahoma. There were several more small battles after Lee's surrender. The Battle of Palmetto Ranch, east of Brownsville, Texas, on the 12th and 13th of May, is commonly regarded as the very last land battle of the war. Ironically, a Confederate victory, which was followed soon after by the surrender of the Confederate forces.
Well, Commander James Airedale Waddell, in command of the CSS Shenandoah, which was a commerce raider of the Confederate States Navy, He was the very last to surrender when he lowered the Confederate flag in Liverpool and surrendered his vessel to the British government November 6, 1865.
Wow.
He was halfway around the world in the Pacific when he learned the war had ended.
Oh, no.
Lee never forgot Grant's magnanimity during the war, or during the surrender, however, and for the rest of his life, he would not tolerate an unkind word about Grant in his presence.
Oh. Well, Confederate General Longstreet spoke well of his old friend Grant, saying he was grateful to Grant for a cheerful greeting and provided him a cigar at Appomattox,
He's like, damn, I haven't had one of these in a while.
as well as later efforts by Grant to get Longstreet a pardon and appointed him to a federal position in New Orleans after Grant became
He
president.
did indeed.
Likewise, General John Brown Gordon cherished Chamberlain's simple act of saluting his surrendered army.
Yes, he did.
He called Chamberlain one of the knightliest soldiers of the Federal Army.
Yeah.
Quote, unquote.
Well, during the Civil War centennial, the United States Post Office issued 5 postage stamps commemorating the 100th anniversaries of famous battles as they occurred over a 4-year period, beginning with the Battle of Fort Sumter in 1961.
Okay.
Battle of Shiloh commemorative stamp issued in 1962. Battle of Gettysburg in 63. Battle of the Wilderness in 64. And the Appomattox Centennial commemorative stamp in 65. American Battlefield Trust and its battlefield land preservation partners, they had to spruce that one up a little bit. They have acquired and preserved 512 acres of the Appomattox Court House battlefield.
There it is.
Good Lord, boys.
There it is. Lee knew this was coming for months and months in advance. He just could not do it. Could not surrender his army of Northern Virginia.
Got to the point where, I mean, obviously you can't blame him. He's not just going to surrender, but when you're totally surrounded and have literally nowhere to go, what do you fight and fucking get all your men killed? Or it's just time to hang them up, boys. Time to hang them up.
Done what you could do.
Boy, oh boy. We're not done. Because next week we will be back for, we'll see Johnson's surrender. We'll have the Battle of Fort Blakely, Morrisville, West Point. And then we'll probably have another episode of the Battle of Columbus, Battle of Anderson, and that very last battle of Palmetto Ranch. And then the war is officially over, and we get into profiling some of these motherfuckers. Mm-hmm. We'll have our first profile episode on Lincoln. We'll probably have to do Lincoln, his life,
All right.
and the assassination.
Right.
So that's probably going to be like a 2-parter for Lincoln.
It has to be.
So yeah, we're not done yet, guys. So hang with us. We got a lot more to come on Battles of the American Civil War. The war may be over, but we ain't.
Ooh.
We'll be here for a long time.
Ain't never gonna stop.
Ain't never gonna stop. We'll see you then next week for more Battles of the American Civil War. We are the Mother Michiganders.
Bang, dang, right.